When you grow up in a community where we are just learning about what colonization has done to us and we're openly talking about it. So when you grow up in a home, there's so much racism in our own home as people of color, and we're taught certain races are not safe. And I think it's getting caught up in this deep-seated system of white supremacy, and it's not the people. It's a system that even white people are so impacted by.
Totally,
so,
yeah.
like, that's where I'm like, we're all connected.
Yeah.
You know, like, it doesn't matter if you're white or you're brown or you're black or you're indigenous. We all have this rich history, and I think we're all seeking liberation and healing. And so when we think of it that way, I think, okay, I want to do my part in teaching my kids, the next generation too, to not think in the way that we've sort of been taught about, oh, you're not good enough.
Today we're joined by Kiran Randhawa, host of the podcast Middle Fingers Up, a show about unlearning, healing, and having vulnerable conversations. I'm so excited to dive into her journey and the power of showing up authentically. Hi, Kiran. Welcome to the show.
I'm Kiran Randhawa, the host of the Middle Fingers Up podcast. You can find me on Instagram at MFU Podcast and everywhere you find your music, YouTube, Spotify, all the places.
So Middle Fingers Up, MFU,
Yes.
That's your main podcast. Tell me how that started and your journey so far.
I love that question because I don't get to talk about that very often. And I think sometimes we have to be reminded of, like, where was the beginning when we're so far in. But Middle Fingers Up was a catalyst to a racial experience my sister and I had at a local bar here in Calgary. And it wasn't the first, but there was something different about that experience. And I think it was because my sister and I were in a different part of our journey. And so that unraveled a lot for me and led me down the path. And I was almost hitting my 40s. So it was like, naturally, you're in this place when you hit your 40s, they say, which is true. You start questioning a lot and sort of get like a rebirth. And so I was in this place where I started to question my role as a brown girl. And I'm in a, marriage with a white man. We have 2 biracial kids. And so it really unraveled a lot for us. And the first episode even is what the bartender said, you people don't tip, amongst other things.
Oh my
gosh. So that was
gosh.
literally the opening of, like, okay, we need to, because I noticed what was happening was we as a community are all experiencing similar things, but we're doing it in isolation. And there's pockets of racial experiences or just existing identity, and we're not talking. So the whole point of Middle Fingers Up was we need to talk, we need to come together. So that's sort of how it started. And
Wow.
yeah.
I mean, it sounds amazing that you did something positive from this experience, but you said, like, on your identity journey.
Yeah.
Talk me through that.
Do you have all day? Okay, so the best way that I can say this is my household growing up was rocky. And I'm the oldest of
Says it all.
immigrants, yes, right? Oldest daughter at that. And I thought, because we didn't talk, that this is how every brown household is. And so I ran away and joined the white people gang and assimilated hard. And, I grew up in Surrey, BC. And while you think there's a lot of brown people, there was a lot of white kids growing up. So I wanted to be like them. I could not see any of us on TV, right? Outside of Bollywood movies. So you sort of want to sort of gravitate towards the majority, and white people were the majority. And so I was accepted because I spoke like them, dressed like them, talked like them, ate like them, all of that. And I think that led me, honestly, to think I was white. Even my husband and I, we've been together for 24 years.
Oh, wow.
And we joke now, because we can, that he married a white girl.
Right.
And then that racial experience happened. And I'll tell you what happened. That night, the worst part of it was when my sister and I were complaining to the manager. I pulled my phone up, and on my screen was a picture of my husband and I. And I said to the manager, and I literally get goosebumps because I'm so disgusted in myself. But this is what I said. I said, I'm different though. Look, I'm married to a white guy. So that opened this like I said, that unraveling of, oh, I've been hiding behind. I've assimilated so hard. I don't even know who I am.
Right.
And that led me down to the 40s. And then, now entering mid 40s, I just started to go back and meet little Kiran and get to know myself again. And it's been a whirlwind since. Yeah. Sorry, long story long.
No, but I mean, also side note, did not that was your age. You do not look that age.
Oh,
not that there is anything wrong with that, but I just wanted to call that out.
I always say, they say black doesn't crack. I say brown doesn't frown.
Ooh,
so
love that.
We age well.
Yeah. Some of us. My sister ages very well. She looks like she's half her age. And I'm the youngest sister, and everyone's always like, "You're older, right?"
Oh,
no. I'm like, no, I'm aging poorly. Thank you.
No way. You have a glow. I disagree.
You.
Yes.
Thank you. She's not here, so you can say that. But I mean, I thank you for being honest about that, because I think I know I have. I can't speak for everyone. I've definitely had cringy moments where I have been a pick-me for my identity almost, not in terms of attention for boys or whatever, maybe that too, but trying to assimilate so hard that you rebel and you kind of lose your culture, and then you have to find your way back. And now we're kind of in that middle where it's like, what am I? Am I, because I'm not and we had this conversation with someone else where it's like, there's an influx of new immigrants coming in that look like us and have the same ancestry and everything, but we like to think that we're different from them because we've assimilated more. Have you had that kind of reflection recently because of all the new immigrants in Calgary?
Honestly, I have let go in the last 6 months all of my white friends.
Oh, wow.
So I have no friends. If anyone is needing friends, please call me. And that is because they're kind people, but they've also been taken by the system. And so it's not the people, it's a system. So
I agree, yeah.
I have now been, and through therapy, going through a lot of work and realizing that sometimes we need to be in spaces, with people that look like us. So I have been hanging out with a lot of immigrants, and these people that I met through the podcast, we become friends. Their kids are born in Canada, so their kids remind me of me. And these are friends who are younger than me, but they're moms and dads, and they remind me of my parents going through, the Diwali and Halloween and how do we do this, and so. For me, hanging around with brown people and then immigrants, I'm learning a lot. And I think sometimes we start in the middle of our story and we don't realize there's more to it than, these stereotypes. And you think of civic sense, you think of model minority, you think of all these sorts of ways that capitalism, colonization, patriarchy, all these systems, they have taught us to kind of be pitted against each other. And then the whole diaspora, right? Of you're a different immigrant. And so I used to be in that, I'm born, raised here.
Yeah, I'm better than you somehow.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think the more I connect with our community, the more I realize it's not even just our community, all BIPOC, all of us, even white people, we are all very connected. These patterns have, taken all of us with these systems. So I really appreciate being in a space where it's less about, are you an immigrant or not? But can I say my name properly? Can I look at you and can we just have a good conversation?
Right.
And so that's sort of where I'm shielding myself from, you're not a good enough immigrant or you're not a good enough Canadian. I got flaws. So I just think we can do better if we can look past were you born here or not. Yeah, there's more to it,
Totally. And that's what being Canadian was growing up for me anyway. I've always felt Canadian.
Yeah.
I wasn't born here, but I came here at a young age and I've always felt Indian. But yeah, I've never felt too Canadian, never felt too Indian.
Yeah.
But I've now I'm at a place that I feel okay with it. I feel happy because I get to pick and choose the best parts of both cultures to build this life. But yeah, I have to catch myself when I make statements or when I even have those thoughts where it's well, those people or this and that about my own community.
Yeah.
And I work within my own community and it is very hard when you see certain patterns. And I have to remind myself too, these patterns are transcending our community. It's happening everywhere. It's just that we're seeing it and the spotlight is on us right now.
And that's just it. It's the way that the systems that we're brought up in, like you said, put the spotlight on people. And so the stats are skewed. So we get so caught up in media. We get so caught up in, oh, it's always this race doing this.
Yeah.
And that's because it feels different because we are a minority. So then more are looking at us. And so when you go look at the numbers for crime and whatnot, it's not that there's a certain race that's doing more or less.
Totally.
But we also, when you grow up in a community where we are just learning about what colonization has done to us, and we're openly talking about it. So when you grow up in a home, there's so much racism in our own home as people of color, and we're taught certain races are not safe. And I think it's getting caught up in this deep-seated system of white supremacy, and it's not the people. It's a system that even white people are so impacted by.
Totally,
so,
yeah.
like, that's where I'm like, we're all connected.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter if you're white or you're brown or you're black or you're indigenous. We all have this rich history, and I think we're all seeking liberation and healing. And so when we think of it that way, I think, okay, I want to do my part in teaching my kids, the next generation too, to not think in the way that we've sort of been taught about, oh, you're not good enough. And side note, I've been to a couple of events where there's been a bunch of, immigrant women, and then there's me. And I got a piece of my own medicine, in terms of what I used to be like, where they're like, oh, you can't read the language. Oh, you were born here.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, it's not cool to be born here anymore. I love this. So a lot of the immigrants also have a voice in a way that I'm only just starting to figure out and find as someone that's born, raised here. So I think that's interesting too, where when you hang around people that are, whether they're born here or not, it's like there's strength in, I don't know, wherever you come from.
Absolutely. Everyone has a strong sense of identity, basically. And they're, as we all should be very proud. But yeah, we look down. I think human beings just want to feel better than other people, right? That's just universal. So whenever we see someone, automatically, I mean, it's loud or soft, but it's there kind of like, oh, I wouldn't do that, or I'm better. I just feel like that's human nature.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, okay, so what if they're this or I'm that? Like, that doesn't matter. But yeah, it's a instant thought. I want to go back to what you said, though. Your husband is white.
Yeah.
And you said that you've cut out white people.
Yeah. Our friends. Yeah.
How does he react to that?
Yeah, it's been a learning curve. Like, how does he react to that? That's a great question. We should call him right now.
Yeah.
I think we went through like a very heightened state in our home when I started seeing a therapist, and then, like someone from my community. So someone that looks like me, that I don't need subtitles to talk to. She's like, yeah, I get it. He also started to see a Punjabi therapist.
Oh, wow.
Because he struggled in the beginning with it's so interesting because a lot of us are it's the facts, and we don't think about people's experience. So because we're two brown women, you might say, well, I have never been, I've never had the experience of racism. And I might say, well, I have. And it's possible to have two things. Like, both things can exist. And so I think that was sort of the lesson for him in understanding that, oh, okay, I've been impacted by this system, and I've been brought up in a certain way. And like those of us that are born in the 70s and 80s, we were taught all the wrong things, right? About all the isms,
Right.
pop culture, like how many musicians can we listen to anymore from our time? And about people with disabilities, people of color. And we're now the first to be unlearning. And so that's sort of what happened for him was I projected really fast in my growth, and he had to catch up, and he did. And we have days where we're like, you need to go back and think about that and come back. And we have days we're like, oh, great. Okay, we did this. We figured it out. We got it. So there's good, bad, and ugly, I think, in any relationship. But then when you are a person of color and you're with someone that's white, and the power dynamics are very different when it's a white person. Two people of color together have very similar struggles about the world looking at them because of their races, but when it's a power race, like a white person and then a person of color, we had to like kind of rebalance, I guess, sort of the way that we looked at things. And he's doing the best he can, and I'm starting to understand too that I'm not going to soften, like I'm going to continue to disrupt. And I think that's been helpful because it's helping me get my voice, and it's helping him be like, yeah, you're right. Like I didn't see it that way. And again, we were all tricked by the way the system works.
Yeah, exactly. We're in the system together, just having different experiences.
Totally.
So in that imbalance, I wonder if like the gender difference is if it's a brown woman and a white man. How does that play a role, especially with kids,
right? 2 boys,
yeah,
too.
2 boys.
Yeah. I think that's a really good question. I think that there's lots of differences, and one for us, like what we experience at home is, we were talking about this before too, like being a woman of color, we gravitate towards my culture, my community. And for him being a white man, he knows like the world is built around him. And one of the big things that he's had to sort of learn is how does he continue to feel the impact of what a brown woman, a person of color would be when one of us isn't in the room. Like sometimes I feel for people of color and white people, it's a proximity thing. So, I have a brown friend. My best friend's brown, and she said, my wife's brown, and even me, my husband's white. And so I think we think proximity means we're allies and we get it. And so we're starting to recognize that's not enough. Just because we're in the same home and we sleep in the same bed and we're under the same roof, it does not mean anything if we don't both understand the issues that are happening. And the whole world is political. Like you know what I mean? Like I didn't understand that until recently either, that every system is connected to the politics of the world. And we have to do our due diligence, and we have to have a responsibility in understanding what that means, because we are raising 2 boys that are in the world half white, half brown, and have to figure out where that fits for them. And so I don't know if I really answered your question, but
no, I mean, I could hear you talk forever, so let me keep going.
I have never heard anyone say that, and it's like, recorded. And my family's gonna hear this. They're all gonna roll their eyes, but I'm just being honest. I think that's what I love with the podcast too. Is like people want honesty over perfection, and that's all this is. Is like, this is my experience. It's not. It's right or wrong, right? It's being more curious than certain, and I think that's a big lesson for Carrie, my husband, and I. Is we're not about being certain. We're about being curious, and is it possible to unlearn some of these things that we've been taught? And it's not really the right way. And now we have to figure out what that means for us. So,
and we talk about this concept, I think, within our community a lot about unlearning, about healing, and about going backwards and then forwards, and all these things. But when you're actually unlearning, when you're actually changing something that comes very naturally to you, it's very hard. And I have this with my partner now, with my husband. I'm like, this is not the right way, or this is not the best way. Like, let's pivot a little bit. And it's very hard to do in the moment.
Yeah.
So I guess my question for you, because your background is also with mental health, what's something that you've had to unlearn about mental health or in that realm? Because I feel like that would be a big journey.
Yeah. I love that question. I think we're all in this boat of, oh my gosh, if it was a game show of like, what have I unlearned? What's behind door one? Right? But even if you look at, the name of your podcast, Brown Girl Problems. And I think for many of us, so it's not even me, it's for many of us, like my story is not unique. I think I learn more and more that I'm part of this deeper collective. And I think we all are. And if, again, brown girl problems, brown boy problems, a big thing for us is, we have never had anyone pave the way for us when it comes to unlearning. Like our parents, many of our immigrant parents, we watched them, silence was survival. So we watched them put their head down and do. And now we're in this era where we are getting to be, and I think it's creating a lot of confusion and guilt, because you don't have to follow the systems of marriage and kids, and you can change your career, you can question it. And I think a lot of women in our community, young women in our community, are sort of in this slump, and they're struggling because they feel like they're given this like freedom, you know, that our ancestors didn't have. They're the first ones in the lineage that get to do something different. And I think the thing for all of us is we have to be patient. We're paving the way and experiencing it at the same time. And this shows up when I'm parenting. Like I go and parent little Kiran, not by purpose, but by, I guess, accident as secondary when I'm parenting my boys. I'll be breaking a cycle while I'm parenting them. So I'm doing something for the first time. And so I think we have to be humble and back then it was like, be humble as a brown girl. And now it's like, okay, be humble, but don't lose your voice.
Yes.
You know, like don't cave. But yeah, like we have to understand we're going to make mistakes because we're all just experiencing this for the first time. And it just reminds me of when I used to work in crisis. Like I used to love the opportunity to do something innovative, which would be like opening up a new program because you can make all the mistakes. You had nothing to compare to. And it was all trial and error. And I feel like that's the same sort of era we are all in now where we're unlearning. So again, I don't even know if I'm answering your question, but I'm just like, for me, unlearning, there's lots of things I'm unlearning. One of the biggest probably things is going back and talking to little Kiran and reminding her that showing up. Like if I knew back then what I know now, if I could just show up for me, my people will fill the room.
Wow.
And I think a lot of us showed up for everyone else before we showed up for ourselves. So like that's probably the biggest unlearning for me is, okay, like find you, look within, not the external stuff that we've all been taught. What do you, like what's the character building you want to do, right? So that word authentic is so new to us, even though it's not new.
Yeah.
Because we've been told how to get married, have kids, do all those things that a lot of people are rebelling against. And I think that's amazing. And I think that's brave. So
It is very brave to show up in a different way. I told you my sister's calling.
Oh, there you go.
I knew she would. It is very brave to show up in that way. And, you know, I think I asked you this question. And even when I was asking it, I was like, this is a pretty unfair question, truthfully, because you can't just have one answer.
Yeah.
Like if you asked me, like, what have you unlearned? I'd be like, I don't know, man. Like so much, so much. And so much I've unlearned, so much that I have learned.
Yeah.
So it is a very unfair question because we're still on that journey.
Totally. Yeah.
And we unlearn something and then we forget about it and we do it again and, you know, make the mistakes and we're stuck in our own loops and it's very hard to recognize when you're in a loop.
Yeah. But that's why we have to talk.
Yeah.
You know, like we're just building data. We're caught up in these like pockets of, again, isolation. But when we're brave and we talk, you know, you have a platform. You are encouraging us women to share our issues. And I think that is amazing because we are not experiencing things in a vacuum. And when I hear someone on your show talk about, oh man, like it's rough. Like my mom thinks I should be married and I'm not. And it's like, this is really good because we're data building and we're talking about why and how and who and what and all those things in the space that we're in now. But if we don't talk about it, we think, oh my God, I'm the worst person. Something must be wrong with me.
Right.
Because
you feel very isolated.
100%.
Yeah.
And the best way to combat that is to share our experiences. And there's no right or wrong in them. Your experience doesn't take away from mine. And mine doesn't take away from yours. If anything, we should be adding to it. Like, oh, I learned this, right? So if we're in this learning student mentality, again, it's like that not being certain, it's being curious. And I think that's where the unlearning happens. And you're right, it's a web of a lot, you know, not one. There's so many things going on in that unlearning, but here we are.
Yeah, we are. We're figuring it out.
Right? Totally. Yeah.
Okay, well, this is something that I've been thinking about as well, even on this podcast and the work that I do, which is working with the South Asian population and mental health. And a lot of times we get stuck talking about the challenges in our culture. Even in our podcast, you know, something we talked about very early on was like, let's just not talk shit about brown people the entire time, even though it's so tempting to talk about certain issues and kind of fixate on them. Even on your podcast, I guess, and even when you're raising your boys or having this conversation with your husband, how do you find that line? Because sometimes it is very hard to be like, this is just how we are. This is a challenge, you know, and like not focus on all the positives.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for one would be, I guess for me is it's not talking crap about our community if I am thinking about what's my role? So sometimes it's like, oh, what are you doing for me to trust you? But it's really, what am I doing to be trusted? So if I center myself without really centering myself, you know what, in it, like, how can I contribute? How am I part of the problem? I don't think that's bad. I think it's when, you know, that whole what will people say mentality that we grow up in, that's scary. And that's very, all the way back to colonization, fear-based, obedience, all of that.
Yep.
And so if we don't think of that, I think it is cool to talk about the challenges, because in there, when we sit, even in healing's not finding answers. It's like sitting within questions. And that's sort of how we find healing, and that's how we figure it out. And so I think talking it out can help us get to where we want to get to, which is, okay, what's the good stuff? You know, where's the solution? But I will say, and I will agree with you, I have learned, as people of color, talking poorly about our community to other communities, that I have learned is like not okay. The context isn't there, and then people take it in a different way, and then it's like, oh, my one brown friend said that all, you know, and I've been, unfortunately, that brown friend. That's the resource center, and I'm like, no, I get why you're keeping me around. I'm not doing this. So I just think we can't talk poorly about ourselves, our community, to others. We're a community that is learning how not to survive, and we have to be compassionate about that. You know, like, again, if we're only starting now to learn what thriving is, how can we be upset with the people before us who didn't have that capacity? You know what I mean? So, but the hard part of that, and I was talking to my sister-in-law about this, is when you have so many resources like podcasts and education and articles and all of these things, it's hard because then you surpass your elders. Like, you do a lot of healing and learning and unlearning. And then sometimes our elders or caregivers are still where they are. And so you have to find some of that within yourself. Like, you may not get the apology from your parents.
No.
You may not get the process that you want. And so we have to figure out how to give that to little us and whatnot. And so I think sometimes that's the challenge, is then we as a community get resentful towards those that didn't know how to, or didn't have the capacity to heal.
It sounds like, you know, you have been on this journey, and you're coming with a lot of grace and empathy for everyone, including yourself.
Oh, that's really kind to hear.
Because, you know, a lot of people do have a lot of resentment towards people who haven't had these experiences, or people who didn't have these learnings, whether it's elders or anyone else. But it sounds like you've come from a place where you're now like, I accept everyone. I empathize with everyone's experience, and I empathize with my own. You know, you're offering grace to everyone. And I feel like that's someone who's really done the work.
Oh, wow.
Truthfully.
Like, I'm getting goosebumps because, you know, sometimes, like, I'm glad you didn't talk to me 6 months ago, right? Where I was like, murder, or like kill everyone. I mean,
we'll edit that out.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Okay, thank you. Oh my God. But if we had talked a few months back, I think there was a lot of entanglement and messiness. But one of the things that every single one of my guests, and maybe you have this too with your guests that I've had, they have always talked about being compassionate towards yourself, give yourself grace. And I think maybe it's just sinking in because the rage and the anger I learned is not getting me anywhere. And I am upset with certain in-laws and certain community members and certain, you know, friends that no longer are there because we couldn't talk about humanity and supporting, you know, people of color. But I just found that anger was like only making me not sleep at night. I don't know if any of them are you know? So I think it's okay. I can be angry, or I can turn that anger into, okay, let's keep talking. Let's keep building the data. Let's keep having these honest conversations. Let's keep disrupting. So, you know, and that's helped me build my voice. And I think that's probably where that grace comes from is I lost my voice, but our voice is our compass. Like if we don't have that, it's hard. We're scrambling and trying to find a way. And I've met really good people, advocates in the community, racial inequity advocates, people that have been doing the work for so long that have given me so much space and time to help me talk it through and learn. And I think that's been really helpful. And yeah, if we're only just beginning this process of changing some patterns, then we have to have grace and compassion. Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love what you said, and it really is a journey. And the other thing is, like, you know, it depends on who you're having these conversations with. That was my big learning, and I've talked about it, is I was definitely having conversations with people who were truthfully like rage baiting me, or like, just like people who were just like trying to play, the whole I'm going to be devil's advocate. But I'm like, why? Why don't you just listen to me and try to hear where I'm coming from instead of arguing for the sake of it? And once I figured out that this is where I'm stuck, and it honestly took me a while, I was like, wow, I actually don't need to be this. I don't need to take this role on as this educator.
Yes.
I don't need to be the one who has to be like, no, but did you actually know this, this, and this? I'm kind of like, okay, if that's what your opinion is, that's fine. I'm going to move on.
Yeah.
And then you actually have your voice for people who care or listen or, are open to hearing a different opinion.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like life-changing.
Yes. And good for you. Like, huge applause to that. Good for you to get there, because that is hard. And these people that like to play devil's advocate and they like loop rage, they find that one thing in there. They don't want to learn. No. They don't want to better the world and, leaving it better than our kids. And I have given up on them as well.
Yeah.
The only one that I couldn't was my husband, because then that would have meant other things that would have had to happen in our household. Right. And so he was my project. Like, you have to figure out how to pull your socks up, because you can't play devil's advocate. You're playing devil's advocate against something that you have zero experience in. And so that's why people go fact check and they're, the stats, because they don't have lived experience. And
exactly.
I don't, right? And don't you feel so blessed that we do? Like, that's where empathy comes from. Yeah. Empathy's learned. And we have really learned that, right? And so I think good for you to get to that place, because it's also taken me a long while. And only recently I stopped personalizing it towards like, certain white people in my circle and white people in general, where I'm like, oh, poor white people too. They've been taken by this system as well. Like, I'm realizing it's not personal. Yeah, it's a system. Yeah, and it's deeply embedded in all of us, and it's happened over centuries, and so it's going to take a long time to undo. But one conversation at a time, where we can learn. And for me, my kids are my priority. I want them to grow up in a world with understanding in a way that maybe you and I didn't have, because our parents didn't have the capacity to say, it was more just put your head down and don't get bottles thrown at you when you're walking outside. Like, it was rough what they had to go through.
It was so rough. And I feel very privileged that we don't have to go through that. Some people, of course, racism still exists.
Oh, 100%.
But yeah. And even now I say this, like the comments on social media that I see, that I read, I'm like, this was a joke in the 90s. Like, why is this coming back about Indian people or South Asians? Like, so there's a resurface, but I think the hostility that they must have felt is like something I truthfully can say I haven't felt to the same extent. Yeah. Because I feel like I can speak the language and I don't have an accent. When I say certain words, it comes out, sure. But like, I can get by. Right. But they didn't have that coverage or they didn't have that. And it's very different to think about. It like breaks my heart sometimes when I just think about the stories and what they must have gone through.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it hasn't gone away. I think it is just gotten nicer. And, we learned about microaggressions. Yes. We learned that big word. And I think I was so grateful for that language, because it's taught me, that's what was happening with my gut when I was like, stop it, gut. No, I'm going to go be friends with this. Like, I'm very bad at picking friends. I have learned. But I think we started to understand the language behind what was happening when we were, staying small, not speaking up, and social media and media in general, all these sorts of things have helped bring it up to the surface. And I think right now South Asians are getting a lot of hard times. Like, there's a lot of racism. And I think when I think about that, part of me, this is going to sound so weird, but part of me thinks it's because our community is also rising and people are feeling very threatened. Yeah, and I think, like arts and culture, we're thriving, right? Like, if it wasn't for those brown boys with their music lately, I don't know of how much I would have got, right? I'm like, just only listening to Punjabi music these days. And there's a lot going on in our community where people are whether they're making shows, podcasts, writing books. And so I just think people are feeling their backs against the wall.
Yeah, totally.
And so that's how I look at it. So I think we should just keep talking, keep building our data, and keep doing what we're doing, and not getting distracted by the poor things that are coming at us. I think and you know, like, I don't feel bad in the same way when someone says something racist to me, because now I have a solid community that I can go. I have my girls' WhatsApp group that I can go to and break this down with. And, you know, I'm like, am I gaslit here? I over during the Stampede, I had a white man decide to come and talk to me and tell me, after learning what I did for a living, and I questioned, like, do I tell him what I do? Like, you know, I have this podcast, anti-racism, and I'm like, you know what? I've had a couple drinks. I'm just going to say it. And so that gave me the courage. And he looked me down the eye and he said, oh my gosh, there's no racism. Everyone's equal. I raise my kids I have 2 twin daughters, and I raise them to understand that everyone's equal. There's no racism. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I know if people can look me in the eye and say those things to me, then I can also build my voice and speak up.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And I'm not going to give him time of the day. But that gave me so much fuel to go write a couple more episodes and have more conversations. So I just think we have to put it towards growth and not let those haters get us, because it just means we're doing something good.
Absolutely. I love that. I mean, if this mediocre man can have confidence, of course we can have confidence.
I know. It's like, why me too? Like, why? Like, why did you pick and choose? You know, but sometimes I'm like, okay. And I've had friends, like we've had a dinner goes so bad, and these were good friends, not anymore, who look me in the dead in the eye too, and are like, there's no racism, you know, white people didn't start racism.
What?
Racism started in different ways. And I'm like, okay, so I like these tests now that come at me, because now I'm like, okay, I'm equipped. I have support. I have understanding. And like you said, I have compassion to be able to not let you, sir, get in my way. Because there's a lot of people doing so much work to bring knowledge, right, to our community. Like I said, like your podcast, there's a lot of good conversations happening, and we have to just
focus on that. Yeah,
100%.
exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think the other big thing is like not personalize it. I think that's a really big lesson.
That's a hard one.
Yeah, it's a hard one to be like, this is just your journey and your knowledge. And, you know, if it wasn't, that's what I always say to myself. I'm like, that person would be spewing this if it was me or someone else. So I can't personalize it. It's not an attack on me. It's just a character of theirs. Yeah. And I use that with like extended family. I use that with my friends, where I'm like, this is actually not about me, and I'm going to sit this one out. And it's brought me so much peace. And I feel like I've mentally checked out a little bit from my life, but I think it's a good thing, because I really do try to save my energy for things that I, you know, care more about.
Totally. Where people are going to want to come together and build and grow, right? And humor is so important in this process of unlearning and all that too, because it's like a form of rebellion as well, right? We didn't get to grow up with joy being the number one priority in our homes.
True.
It was
survival.
100%, you know? And so there was times when you could have joy and stuff. And I think when we bring in humor, and I love, like, there's so many South Asian comedians out there too. And I'm like, because it's a wild story the way we grew up, but can we kind of bring it back and talk it out and find moments where we can laugh it off too, because there's a lot of darkness in that. And like you said, it brings us down, and then, you know, we don't have the energy to be able to be productive in the world. And by productive, I mean like good members of society, not just, you know, working 70,000 hours or whatever it is that you're supposed to work. I don't know. But I think if we can find humor and joy, and then again, if we look at our community, arts and culture is really thriving. And when a community has arts and culture, I believe that means you're doing well as a community. And in ours, there's so many musicians, directors, actors, writers, list goes on, and artists. There's a lot of that happening. And so I think, okay, we got, and it's not dividing. Well, you're not Indian, you're, you know, like, we are all one. We're a global majority. And I think if we look at it that way, we're like better together than, again, isolating ourselves.
I was thinking about that today, and I was like, I wonder if that's a conversation for another time, I feel, because it's such a nuanced controversial conversation also, to be like having this South Asian identity, but then having a niche identity within it and trying to like push boundaries, which I think is very valid. But as someone who's just like always just been like, I'm Indian and I'm Canadian, to me, I'm always like, tell me the importance of this and why it means so much to your identity. And I understand the history behind it.
Yeah.
So I get that piece of it. But it's a really interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Without getting too deep into it. Do you have any thoughts about it?
I mean, I think you're right about that. I think identity is important when it's been taken away from you. And India has had a lot of that, you know, Pakistan, all of our sister countries and whatnot. And I think that makes sense why people hold on to it too. But I also, and I could be wrong too, and I'm okay being told I am, but I don't know. I just think when I go to these events and I just see people of color in the room and I gravitate towards that. I don't see, oh, you're from Bangladesh, so that's different, or you don't say Indian, or you say South Asian, or you say whatever. There's sometimes we get so caught up in the correct terms or the correct, you know, this is my cultural belief, that we take away from, again, being curious. And again, we're all one. We all had to conquer liberation. We all had to conquer, you know, healing. So
absolutely,
sure, you might do something different on Diwali than I do, and you might celebrate, you know, weddings in a different way. But again, at the end of the day, what's the root of it? You know what I mean? And I don't know. I think our ancestors would probably want to tell us, like, don't let that get in the way. Just getting caught up in those systems again. Don't let that get in the way. That's that's the old colonial obedient pattern of this is how we were taught to be. And I think we have to push that a bit.
That's my initial thoughts. And again, I have this conversation from a place of curiosity and not judgment, because if someone wants to be identified a certain way from a certain state or wherever it is, I respect that because that's their personal decision. But to me, I'm like, again, if it's historical trauma, that's important to be recognized. But what is happening here? Like, why is it so important? And I think like this is like all off topic, but
it's the best conversation.
Yeah, but I'm just like but you know, I think for Diljit Dosanjh, like he even said this. He's like, you know, it's so important for me to say I'm from Punjab, I'm Punjabi, because no Punjabi artist has done this. And I'm like, absolutely, that's true, because maybe Indian or South Asian have.
That makes sense.
So I am like, that's amazing to be proud of your roots that way.
Yeah.
But you don't see anyone else saying it I'm from Gujarat, or I'm from, you know, things like that. So it sticks out in a certain way. But yeah, I'm always curious to understand that.
Yeah. I know identity is one of those things that's, like you said, it's fascinating. And I think, you do you. If you are so connected. You know, I have friends that are very religious. I'm not. And so they'll want to share how God is going to come and help us in these tough situations. I have different beliefs, but I'm not going to argue them.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you believe that? Cool. As long as we're not harming. My aunt taught me this as a little kid. Like, if you are not harming yourself or others, then what you believe or what you're, you know, sort of doing or whatever you're getting involved in, it's not that bad at the end of the day, and it's not that deep either.
Yeah.
But I don't want to argue any of that, because I get, like, I wasn't part of the partition. I wasn't there in India at the time when these things are going down, and in some of these other countries. So I think a lot of people bring that and hold on to it. It's like hoarding in some ways. You know, when you don't have a place to be or belong, everything is meaningful. And so I don't know. I don't have any hate or whatnot towards it. I know for me, in my home, a big part of our identity in raising the kids is like, what does it mean to be a good soul?
Yeah.
And let's break that down every day. And my kids roll their eyes because every time they ask me a question, now they're like, because I'm always like, well, in society. And so my youngest is like rolling his eyes every day. He's like, if you say society one more time, Mom, I'm like, no, you got to know this. This is what's going to help you make your decisions. And that's all I care about.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I don't know. I think I don't want to get into those arguments because I don't,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I think
fair.
we as people of color have a bigger fight than,
Within each other.
than, like what part of the
Hopefully.
river are you from or what. I think I don't want to argue that. I see some other stuff that we need to come together to fight when it comes to some of these systems that are, because at the end of the day, it does not matter as a person of color what your spiritual, what your religious, what your beliefs, what your identity is. If you and I are going to go get support with the law or mental health or medical, we're going to get treated the same. And it's not always the greatest.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing that I want to focus on. Then, okay, well, you're not Punjabi enough. And I get that all the time. Like I don't even say my name right because I was taught by white people how to say it.
Oh, same.
You know what I mean? Yeah, totally. Right.
Yeah.
How are you supposed to say your name?
Adorni.
Aroni?
Yeah, Adorni.
See, I can't even roll my arm like disgrace, right? I'm kidding.
Yeah.
And I say Kiran.
Yeah.
And I get made fun of all the time by my cousins. They're like, Kiran?
I had like this, it was so funny. I was meeting my husband's like family, extended family, they were over. And it was this woman who was like a little bit older than me and she spoke English. And she's like, what's your name? Like, I haven't met you. And I was like, because I was like, which version do I say? Because like I literally, and she just kind of was like, okay. I was like, wait. I promise I'm normal. Like, let me just try again. And I was like, Aruni, because that's what they're gonna call me, and I'm gonna say it. But I just say Aruni, and even like my mother-in-law, I think, calls me Aruni because he's introduced me as Aruni. So only my parents and my sister, maybe. I don't even know what she calls me now that I think about it. Like everyone just says Aruni, and when I say it's actually Aruni, they're always like, whoa, that sounds vastly different.
Yeah.
It's like deeper.
And don't you feel that too? Like sometimes I'm like, I'm a joke. And isn't that terrible? I'm like, I'm not a joke. That's my name.
Yeah.
That's what my parents say it. But why do I have a hard time?
Yeah. And I've had people like claim their name back. Like I have a friend named, I say Salman, and he is like, my name's Salman. And I was like, I can't because I've called you Salman my entire life.
I know, right?
But it's like he goes by Salman now. And I'm like, wow, good for you. When did you have this, acceptance of your identity?
Yeah.
Because you've introduced yourself as Salman for years.
Yeah. I know. I appreciate that. People that are doing that because I'm still
stuck.
Depends, like you said, what part of the room I'm in or who I'm around. And then it's Kiran versus, Kiran.
Yeah. It's more exotic somehow.
One time at work, because my husband's last name is McKay, and I didn't change my last name, but I went by McKay at work, and somebody was from Alberta Health Services was coming to meet me, and they had said, you're going to meet with a Kiran McKay. And so he gets there, and he's like sweating because he was riding his bike, and it took him forever to get to this meeting. He didn't want to be late. So he just seemed off, and he's shaking hands and looking at me weird. And I'm like, I don't know what's happening, but welcome, like take a breath. And so then at the end of the meeting, he's like, can I just say? And I'm like, what? He's like, when someone told me I was meeting a Kiran McKay, I was expecting this huge Scottish, like jolly man. And then I see this like brown woman in front of me, and he's like, it threw me off. And I was like, oh yeah, that's hilarious.
That's so funny. I wouldn't have put that together.
I know, right? I know. I'm like, well, technically it's not Kiran, but yeah.
Okay. That's true. Wow. Yeah. That's so funny. It's like just the way we say it. But okay, for the sake of time, I have one last question for you. I mean, you've already kind of answered it, but just in case you have another answer, is what advice would you give the younger version of yourself?
Ooh, I like that one. I was asked that one too. I think what I said earlier was just like figure out how to show up for you.
Yeah.
And your people will follow. They will show up. They will be there. And your voice is your compass. Those are the two things that I'm now reteaching myself. Do not lose that voice.
Yeah. And once you find it, you can't, I think.
Yeah, I know. It's annoying in my house. Everyone's like, oh, now mom's got things to say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's still very valid, beautiful advice. So thank you for sharing that. Well, you survived. How does it feel to be on the other side?
I loved it. Yeah. I don't know. You'll have to come on too. I don't know if you've been interviewed. But it's a nice vibe, right? It gets you thinking, and then you get the empathy for your guests when they're on or what. But you were such a great host. I love your space. I love what you're doing. And I was very, very happy that you reached out. And I think that's how it should be. Like brown people coming together, brown women coming together.
And supporting each other.
Yes, yeah. So I was very honored to be here today. And you just have a great energy, like very calm and, just present, which is really, really nice.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice. I mean, honestly, I didn't just like I could listen to you the entire time. Like I'm going to obviously continue listening to your podcast, but you know, you say things so eloquently. And I'm just like, yes, that. Exactly all my thoughts, but that. Anyway, so thank you for like showing up again authentically, but showing up and like, you know, saying your truth and supporting all the work you're doing in the community.
Yeah,
it's
likewise.
incredible.
I know, likewise.
Oh, I love this.
Me too, I know. After shaking hands, we're going to hug after.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming. This was such a fun conversation. I loved everything you had to say, and I can't wait for you all to listen.